rattle off forever. So,
Yeah.
again, you can tell me like, dude.
It's fine. It's a good story. I like the stories.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's why I like to do interviews because there's always a good story.
It's the
Almost,
best.
almost always. And then maybe one interview was like they weren't very forthcoming with anything, even about their
Yeah,
music. I was like, short-lived.
and you're like, so why did you agree to the interview if you didn't really want to talk?
Like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, that
So
happened to me once. I had one band where they promised me the singer. They gave me the brand new bassist who joined the band a week prior and didn't tell me until last minute. So I had all these questions designed for, the singer.
yeah, yeah.
And so what ended up being the worst interview I ever had. And it really wasn't the bassist's fault. He was just kind of like taking one for the team in a
Yeah,
way.
they just threw him in there. Like,
Yeah,
go,
so
go do it.
and I told the publicist, I said, look, I don't blame him, but that was just god awful. And the poor guy was like a sacrificial lamb at this point. So,
He's, I don't know.
transcript, and I can't use this. So they went ahead and rescheduled and got me the singer another day.
It's good. Do you still get out the shows?
Not as much as I used to. So I took TJ to see Depeche Mode a couple months ago. So we were very lucky to see that. That was
Yeah.
wonderful. And then I saw Voivod earlier. Let's see what September? Yeah, September or something like that. I got to see that. It's one of my all-time favorite bands, Voivod. I'm going to Armored Saint with a buddy of mine in May of this year. And then another one of my friends came to my book signing this morning. So she and I were talking about going to do a show out in Delaware. So that's about an hour 15. So she didn't want to drive. I said, I'll drive. Are you kidding me? Back in the day, I was road dogging all the way up to all the time or down into the south. So I mean, it's like it's nothing. I'll do it. Let's go.
Hour and a half's not bad. Yeah. So I don't live real close to big cities, but I wish I did. I used to live in Columbus, so I'm like, I wish I was doing vlogging then. I could go to shows like every day almost.
Is that city as gritty as it seemed? Back in 1989, we stayed there, and that was like on the way back from out west from Colorado. We stayed at a hotel there that was sketch as all get out. That was 1989.
I think it depends on what side of town. If you go up by where Polaris is, I don't know if you've been there. So, like the north side,
Yeah.
Delaware, and so the big concert venues, Polaris, it's outdoor. So they built up a lot of stuff, a lot of malls and shopping centers and everything. But it's a nice area.
Yeah.
So I stayed at a hotel a couple months ago in that area, and it wasn't bad. And I was by myself, so it's like I didn't feel like scared. I didn't feel scared or anything, but yeah, if you go in other areas, it's like I've stayed with Lucas in a hotel, my boyfriend, and we just picked this hotel. It's last minute, and like, are you sure this elevator is sketchy? And I think there's bullet holes in the bathroom, maybe. Not good. It was not. We're not going to go back there. Like, it was run down on top of like. It might not have been bullet holes, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. This was I was at my first wife about the very end of our honeymoon. We had a 2-week honeymoon, but we went up. She wanted to go to Atlantic City, and we were pretty much broke. I said, "Why do you want to go up there? We just spent all of our money on our honeymoon." She wanted to go up there. She won a little bit on the slots, and we're trying to find a place to stay. And anything on the boardwalk was too expensive. So we ended up going to this trashy motel, and I mean trashy. I mean, you could smell what's been going on in there. It was just so nasty, and part of it was bleach trying to cover it all up. And we laid pull the blankets down. We were exhausted, so it was like I didn't want to drive home that late. Although really, in retrospect, only about a 2-hour drive. But just lay there. I couldn't sleep. It was so gross, disgusting. Then we saw roaches all over the place. It was foul, and you can just know that someone had been in there doing something. They didn't bother cleaning up. So
Gross.
it was like 4:30 in the morning. I said, I can't take it anymore. She goes, neither can I.
Right. You're just wide awake thinking germs and bugs. Germs and bugs. Oh, I couldn't do it. No, I
Yeah.
guess. Oh,
All the needs to get home.
I just so I'm kind of new to metal. Not new. Like, so my boyfriend Lucas is like the real heavy metal fan. Not that I'm not,
Yeah.
but so I don't know. I guess I've really liked it for the last 15 years, so I'm still kind of new-ish. I still have always liked music. So what do you think about gatekeepers that are like, well, if you can't name 3 songs, you're not a real fan. And you get that in comic books too, sort of like you don't know all the storylines.
Oh
You
yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
everything. You can't be a real fan.
right. I'm a huge comic book fan as it is as well too. So I get where you're coming from as far as the gatekeeper thing. There's another name for that. It's called elitist. So it's like, you know, I don't really appreciate people who kind of like judge others
Right.
in that respect. I mean, if you like the material, you'll like the material. If you don't, you'll learn. I mean, it's again, I was going back to earlier when I was talking about all the different genres that I explored. Look, I was not versed in a lot of that stuff, but I went in and I dug into it, learned
Right.
it until I could really start speaking the language of those genres. And a lot of people be like shocked that a metalhead could talk about funk,
Right.
or that kind of stuff. Or like, what do you mean you went down to the Stax Museum down in Memphis? I said, yeah, I love funk and soul. So next thing you know, you can be engaged in a conversation about that. There's just like a lot of just prejudging out there that doesn't really
Yeah.
need to be. If you have a common ground of some comic books, music, movies, sports, any of that stuff, I mean, I don't really agree with people shaming one another if you're not as well versed. And if it's something that you're really curious about, you're really starting to develop a liking for. If you run into too many people like that, then it for me, kind of like poisons the well a little bit.
Yeah.
It, there's no point into it. I mean, everybody just have a mutual respect for one another. And I think the people that would be considered the gatekeepers will share your knowledge. If you see someone who is still learning, recommend some albums, and maybe that person's have heard it, maybe they haven't. Maybe turning somebody on to something new. That's how we built scenes. That's how we built it in the '80s. Well, between metalheads and the punk rockers back then, we shared the music with each other. Initially, there was a lot of animosity between the two sanctions, but once crossover happened back then punk rockers and metalheads united because of the music uniting. So we taught each other our music. And so it's like became less of a snotty kind of thing back then. If you have a metalhead who knew Bad Brains and Minor Threat, Misfits, or a lot of the punks who knew Black Sabbath and Candlemass. A lot of the punks like the slow doomy stuff for some reason because they were listening to fast hardcore stuff, but they really loved doomy sludge stuff. So it's like and that's how we did it though. So we shared it with each other. Anybody that was real new. If they were interested, then like, what's up? Well, here's an album. Here's another album. I even had kids trying to teach me alternative rock back in high school. I wasn't receptive to it then. It came along a couple of years later, but people knew how deadly serious about music I was in school. So they were pushing stuff at me. They wanted me to give it a try. So I think there should be more of that kind of like open door policy to people. And, if the person trips on what what you're putting out there, great, cool. Then you've made a new friend. You've made a broader perspective to your appreciation. But yeah, definitely, I think there's got to be less elitism.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because I'm not like new, but so it's fun now that I know a lot of metal bands, well, all kinds of bands, but I could go up to Lucas and be like, "Hey, here's this cool metal band. I think you'll like them."
Yeah.
Like, he never told me about Slayer till this year. Like, I knew I've heard of them, but I hadn't
Right.
really listened to him. And I go into the room and he's watching this music video of this live performance from years ago. And I'm like, "Oh, who is that? They're great. I love them. What is it?"
Right.
Because I don't recognize their faces. He's
Yeah.
like, "Slayer." I'm like, "Why didn't you share it with me before?" Like, why didn't anybody? I don't know. I don't know.
A little bit of joy of discovery.
Like,
Yeah.
so,
When I got into heavy metal was 1982, and I had two cousins by marriage. Now, at that time, I was listening to all of the early 80s pop music and new wave.
yeah,
Um, and I loved that stuff, but I had two different cousins, one who wanted me to listen to the new wave with him. The other one pulled me into his bedroom. He's like, let me introduce you to a new world. And that's exactly how he said it. So he put on Iron Maiden's Killers and Ozzy's Dying of a Madman. I was changed for life.
yeah,
You know, so the other cousin was PO'd about it, but I still went and sat down and listened to his music too.
yeah.
Uh, and that's just how you do. But that was the most intoxicating moment of my music listening life. Was just sitting there, like, and when I heard those albums, like, oh my God, finally something that sounds like how I feel inside, but I don't talk about to anyone.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more of that. Like, Bad Brains, when I heard Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye, I fell to my knees. I was like, that's the most righteous sound in music I've ever heard. It's one of those things you could almost weep to. That is, how fantastic it is as it is. It's the most honest sound I've heard from anybody. Yeah, I mean, it's just that joy. I mean, even System of a Down's Toxicity, that's one of those albums that also just went,
Right.
just knocked me out on initial contact. I was like, yeah, wow, yeah, there was the same thing as listening to the Sergeant Pepper's or Dark Side of the Moon. They're just albums that were just that much on the highest level of anything I've ever heard. So I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. Those four albums that I mentioned. So, and even Metallica's Master of Puppets. I heard that. I ran up the train tracks to our local music shop. Same one in my book, actually, Curry's Music, and got my own copy of Master of Puppets. So I would have to say at least those five albums, along with obviously Iron Maiden and Ozzy in the early days, was just like, oh.
Yeah. That's great.
What aside from Slayer, like, that gave me that, like, oh my God, what else? What other bands?
Oh, so I did notice that you also make um comic book comic book scripts. I keep wanting to say strips, and I'm like, wrong word. So how did you start that journey?
Well, yeah, I'm still trying to break in. I'm doing a lot of networking between science fiction writers and comic book artists and writers. It's very, very slow. It's one of the most difficult things to break in. So I'm trying and trying and trying. I auditioned for a couple of publishers. One of them told me that I had the chops. She said I should be in it, but the script that I came in, because this was a really well polished script. However, it's been covered in this issue back here. I said,
Dang it.
and I spent months researching too.
Right.
It's something I still want to do. What I'm doing right now is my own project with my artist friend in Germany, Dominic Velicello, and it's called Metalheads, and it's a horror satire. And I started coming up with that towards my end of time in the music industry, the little things that I saw that was making me disgruntled with the industry itself. So I started coming up with that script, and then I just decided, you know what? I just can't sit here and piss and moan like, for two issues about what I'm feeling about that. We got to do something meaningful with it. So I decided to make a horror story. And so Dominic, I knew from another project that we worked on together. And when he was available, then he's like, yeah, let's do this. So we took a chance. We did one issue. He sold out of his copies in Germany. The money that I had, I was going to do on my own over here. I had to pretty much fork over to the bills, so I never got to release it over here. So we're taking another stab at it here. The script is pretty much the same. I did a couple tweaks, and I've just revised the next two issues, and he's doing brand new art. And so I've made my pitches to some of the publishers. Now, I mean, obviously, somebody like Marvel or DC ain't going to pick something like that up. But I'm trying to look at places like Image and some of the other independents.
Right.
Image is the greatest independent publisher out there. I mean, I think they put the most top-notch comic books out there. There's something for everybody in comic books, no matter what you like. But Image pretty much caters to that because you're going to find something you may like with them. But to answer your question, I was just so really, as much as I've loved music, I've loved comic books even more and longer, since I was a kid, and it's just something I've always wanted to do. I'm always trying to like do anything I can in writing. Anything that will hopefully resonate with people. And right now it's solid fiction, and also doing these comic book scripts, hoping to catch on. I've made some very nice connections, but a lot of times you got to have your credentials before they'll give you a time of day, and that's
Right.
how I did it in metal. It's like I had to do a lot of free work to get where I was. That's you just got to just keep grinding, and that's one of my most famous sayings in my my world is keep grinding. That is with my exercise routine to writing to life. You got to keep grinding, man. You have to.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Do you have a favorite horror novel?
Oh yeah, totally. It's Stephen King's The Shining. Blew me away. I read it at age 12, and that right there said, I want to be a writer. I was just mystified. My grandfather, I would go and spend, about a week or two spread out over two different times with my grandparents. And my grandfather always just take me out shopping in the morning to whatever different store. But he knew I liked to read. My grandfather was a deep, serious reader. He loved a lot of pulp novels and detective novels, but he also liked mythology and a lot of nonfiction. But I was curious to Stephen King after seeing Salem's Lot on TV as a kid back in the 70s.
Mhm.
That part with where his friend comes scratching up at the window, floating there, scared the piss out of me, man. And I was just a little kid with a black and white TV, no less. So as soon as I saw written by Stephen King, I was just curious to know, what kind of mind came up with that. So I found the book, and my grandfather just took it out of my hands, put it in the shopping cart. And then I was looking at some of the other Stephen King books, and he did the same thing. Shining was one of them. So um, once my grandparents were old, so they would get tired and take naps. So during those times, I would just sit there and just devour these novels. But The Shining, I almost finished at age 12. I almost finished that, before my parents came to get me, and I just sat there with my mouth just like. I mean, a lot of the language was above me for a 12-year-old,
Right.
but I got it 100%. And then when I reread it at 17 and then I reread it in my 30s, I was just like, wow, it still is my favorite horror novel of all time, no question.
We went to Denver. So, and the outside of Denver is where the Stanley Hotel is.
Dying to see it.
That is a beautiful hotel. Very interesting. Has a lot of Stephen
Oh,
King memorabilia and stories. And you get to go past like lots the scary room. like, like I hadn't seen The Shining yet. My boyfriend had. And like the hoses are on the wall, and I'm like, everybody's freaking out. Like, something must have happened in the movie. And I just was always too scared to watch it. But I watched it last year, and I'm like, what was I scared of? I don't know. It was fine. It was fine. It was
The
creepy. Definitely creepy. Definitely scary.
Yeah. Was it the Stanley Kubrick Shining, or did you
Yeah.
watch the miniseries? Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I watched the second version.
The TV miniseries is very accurate to the book because Stephen King himself kind of sat in on the
Yeah.
thing. and made sure it was right. I mean, he famously hated Stanley Kubrick's version.
Yeah. So
I do love it. I love it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And I know
like,
Mr. King is,
great.
yeah, he's finally come to terms with that because with Doctor Sleep came out, they did such a great job transitioning, even though they had to cut out the last third of Doctor Sleep, the novel, and reinvent to connect Stanley Kubrick's Shining to Doctor Sleep. Have you seen the Doctor Sleep movie yet?
Think so with Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen all of it. I've seen most of it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant as well. They did a wonderful job with that.
It's good so far, but I haven't watched the whole thing yet.
Really can. But I know that movie adaptation helped him reconcile his anger towards Stanley Kubrick's Shining. So I think he's at peace with that now. So yeah,
seems weird.
Yeah, I understand why he has a problem with it. I do understand why, because his main thing is he thought that Jack goes crazy too quickly in the movie. But I mean, it was already a 2-hour 20. It's not really that you could cut from the movie, even at that length. I mean, it is just one powerful scene after another. So, you know, but I get where he was coming from. But I'm like most people. I think the movie is just tremendous.
Great. Again. Oh my gosh, we might be on the last question. I'm gonna go through my questions. Like, oh, 2 more questions. What do you want people to know about your book?
I just want to know about people to know about the book. Is I think no matter what age you are, what generation you are, you may not really identify per se with the main characters, but I think you'll look in that entire culture and pick out people you knew, no matter what your generation is. That was my whole thing. I think that everything I say in there transcends generations. The story itself transcends generations, I think. I was setting out to make an outsiders type of story, and which I think is the most profound teenage novel that's ever been written.
Yeah.
I wanted to capture the essence of that without ripping her off. But I felt that I could tell a outsiders type story with my experiences, and I just the biggest thing I just want everybody to know is just that I think there's a lot that you can grab from the novel, no matter what your walk of life in school was, because the characters, you got your main characters, you got side characters, but there are so many people I throw out there, even if they're just passersby in the scenes. I was trying to acknowledge as many different people as I could from my observations in school. I never used any of my direct friendships or any direct relationships, didn't use my girlfriend at the time. But there were some people that were real to the time and real to our school and our area. But I really just wanted it to be kind of like a time capsule for my generation, but also you can look at the people there, and if you're from a different generation, I think you'll be able to. And I've heard other people that were older than me say, "Oh yeah, something's never changed."
That's true.
And I was like, "All right, cool, thanks, man."
Oh, where can people find your book?
Yeah. Right now, the paperback is available at Amazon. It will be at Barnes & Noble shortly. It's also available at Lulu. And then, of course, in ebooks, there is over at Kobo and all the, why can't I come up with the plot? You can edit this part. Kobo, Kindle, Nook. There you go. All of the main ebook distributors.
Okay.
And anybody who wants to reach out to me directly, I take PayPal, and I'll send you a signed copy if you want to PayPal. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Well, thanks for having part 1 and part 2 interview here.
Appreciate your time, Holly, sticking around with me, and thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it. Real pleasure getting in there again to read your blog.
You too. Thank